The Titanic lost 1,514 people, and the world gave it 3 movies, a museum, and a song everyone knows. The Wilhelm Gustloff lost 9,400 people in January 1945, and you probably just heard that name for the first time last week. But 77 days after Gustloff, in the same freezing Baltic Sea, a smaller ship named Goya took 7,000 people down in 7 minutes, and only 183 lived. This is not a story about a battle. This is a story about an evacuation that became a massacre, and why you were never taught the name. It is April 16, 1945. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler has 11 days left to live in his bunker. The Soviet Red Army has already taken East Prussia. On the coast, in the port the Germans call Gotenhafen, which is Gdynia in Poland today, the German Navy is running the largest sea evacuation in history. They call it Operation Hannibal. Since January, more than 2 million soldiers, wounded men, women, and children have been loaded onto anything that floats to escape the Soviets. Cruise ships, hospital ships, freighters, fishing boats. The Wilhelm Gustloff was the first disaster. The Steuben was the second. The Goya will be the third. The MV Goya was not built for this. She was built in Oslo, Norway in 1940 as a modern motor freighter, 4,100 tons, 448 feet long, named after the painter Francisco Goya. The Germans seized her during the invasion of Norway. For 4 years, she carried cargo. In 1945, they painted her gray and turned her into a troop transport. On the night of April 16th, she is in Gotenhafen, and the docks are chaos. The Soviet army is 30 miles away. The order is simple and brutal. Take everyone you can, sail west to Denmark or Kiel. Do not wait for an escort. The official capacity for a ship like Goya as a transport was maybe 800 soldiers with hammocks. On this night, the manifest says 6,100 soldiers from the 25th Panzer Regiment and other units, plus 183 crew, plus over 700 civilian refugees, mostly women and children from East Prussia. That is more than 7,000 souls on a ship designed for a few hundred. There are not enough lifeboats for 7,000. There are not enough life jackets. There is no time to do a proper loading drill. Survivors later said people were sleeping in the engine room, in the cargo holds, in the corridors, on the open deck in -2-degree air. The ship sits so low in the water that waves wash over the deck. At 7 p.m., Goya casts off. She is supposed to sail in a convoy with 2 smaller vessels, the Kronenfels and an escort minesweeper. By 11 p.m., in the dark, Goya has pulled ahead. She is alone, making about 9 knots, and she is not zigzagging. The captain is trying to save fuel and time. The water temperature is 2 degrees Celsius. If you fall in, you have about 15 minutes before your heart stops. The air is clear, the sea is calm, and the moon gives just enough light to see a silhouette for miles. 20 miles to the north, running on the surface to recharge batteries, is Soviet submarine L3, commanded by Captain Vladimir Konovalov. L3 is an old mine-laying submarine, but tonight she is hunting. Konovalov missed his chance at Gustloff in January. He has been patrolling the evacuation routes for weeks. At about 11 p.m., his hydrophone operator hears heavy screws. Slow, steady, no escort pinging. Konovalov orders the boat to battle stations and turns toward the sound. He surfaces. Through his periscope, he sees it, a large freighter, overloaded, lights showing on deck because there are too many people to keep blackout discipline. He closes to less than 1,000 meters. He cannot miss. At 11:52 p.m., he fires 2 torpedoes from his bow tubes. The first torpedo hits Goya at the stern, near the rudder. The second hits a few seconds later amidships, right under the funnel, in the engine room, where hundreds of wounded men are sleeping on stretchers. The men on the escort ships behind Goya said the explosion was so bright it turned night into day for a second. It was not a sinking, it was a detonation. The Goya does not slowly fill with water like Titanic. She breaks in 2. The keel snaps, the bow and stern lift up, and the middle, where the engine room was, simply vanishes. 7,000 people are inside that steel box when it breaks. Think about what happens in those first 30 seconds. The lights go out instantly because the generators are gone. The ship is in 2 pieces, so there is no up or down, only water rushing in from the middle and from both ends. Men in the lower holds are trapped behind watertight doors that will never open again. Men on deck are thrown into the air by the blast, then land in water that is 2 degrees. The ship was overloaded, so she has no reserve buoyancy. She goes down fast. Witnesses timed it. 7 minutes from the torpedo impact to the moment the propellers disappeared. 7 minutes. There is no time to launch lifeboats. The davits are twisted by the explosion. There is no time to send a full SOS. The radio operator gets off a partial signal, but it is garbled. There is no time to put on a life jacket even if you had one. People jump. They hit the water and their muscles seize from the cold shock. They try to swim, but their clothes weigh 100 pounds. They grab for anything. Wooden hatches, crates of ammunition, dead bodies that float because of the air trapped in their coats. And in the water, it is dark and it is loud. People are screaming in German, calling for their mothers, their children. The oil from the bunkers spreads on the surface and burns their eyes and throats. The two escort ships, the Kronenfels and the minesweeper M328, turn back into the wreckage. They are small ships. They lower nets and ropes. They pull people out one by one, but the cold is faster than any rescue. A man in the water at 2 degrees loses consciousness in under 15 minutes. He is dead in 30. The escorts are there within 20 minutes, but most of the people they find are already still. They work for 3 hours in the dark, pulling bodies and the few living from the oil slick. When the sun comes up on April 17th, they have rescued 183 people, 183 out of more than 7,000. That is a survival rate of about 2.5%. It is one of the lowest survival rates of any shipwreck in modern history. The dead are everyone else. Over 6,800 soldiers, most of them wounded from the Eastern Front, who had survived Stalingrad and Kursk only to drown in the Baltic. Nurses from field hospitals, civilian refugees, mothers with children who had already walked 100 miles through snow to reach the port, and 200 men of the 25th Panzer Regiment, an entire unit, gone in 7 minutes. The Soviet submarine L-3 did not stay to watch. After firing, Konovalov dove deep and left the area. In his log, he recorded sinking a large enemy transport of about 6,000 tons. He was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union for this patrol. He never knew the true number he had killed. And then, for 50 years, almost nothing was said. Why? Because in April 1945, Germany was collapsing. On April 30th, Hitler killed himself. On May 8th, Germany surrendered. The world had just seen the concentration camps. No one in the Allied countries had any sympathy left for German refugees, even if they were women and children. The Soviet Union, which had just lost 27 million people in the war, was not going to apologize for sinking a German troop ship. The British and Americans, who were about to start the Cold War with those same Soviets, did not want to publicize a Soviet war crime while they needed Stalin as an ally for the final weeks against Japan. So the Goya was buried in paperwork. The German records were lost in the chaos of defeat. The Soviet records called it a legitimate military target, which technically it was, because it was carrying soldiers. The few survivors were scattered across West Germany, and they had no one to listen. For decades, the families were told their sons and husbands were missing in the East. No body, no grave, no story. The wreck itself was not found until 2003 by Polish divers. It sits at 76 meters deep, about 40 miles off the Polish coast, broken exactly in two, just as the survivors described. The bow points east, the stern points west, with a debris field of boots, helmets, and personal items spread between them. It is a war grave, and diving is now forbidden. When you put Goya next to Gustloff, you start to see the real scale of Operation Hannibal. Gustloff, 9,343 dead on January 30th. Steuben, about 4,500 dead on February 10th. Goya, about 7,000 dead on April 16th. That is more than 20,000 people lost in 3 shipwrecks in less than 3 months, all in the same sea, all trying to flee the same army. That is more than the Titanic, the Lusitania, the Arizona at Pearl Harbor, and the Indianapolis combined, and most people have never heard of any of them. We remember Titanic because it was peacetime, it had millionaires on board, and James Cameron made a love story about it. We forgot Goya because it was wartime, it had refugees on board, and the winners of the war decided the story was inconvenient. But the numbers do not care about politics. 7,000 people boarded a ship in Gotenhafen on April 16, 1945. 7 minutes after 2 torpedoes hit, the ship was gone. 183 people were pulled from the water alive. The rest are still in the Baltic. That is the truth based on German naval archives, Soviet submarine logs, and the testimony of the survivors who lived long enough to be interviewed in the 1990s. The Titanic took 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. The Goya took 7 minutes. The Titanic had lifeboats for half its people. The Goya had lifeboats for almost none. The Titanic's band played as she went down. The Goya's passengers screamed in the dark, and then the sea went quiet.